Welcome, Peter. It's great to have you on.
So thanks for having me, Vamsi.
Yeah, so could you just tell us a bit about yourself to get started?
Sure. Well, my name's Peter. I'm a professional chess coach, but also a big gaming enthusiast outside of that. Played a lot of games competitively. I started off with StarCraft way back in the day. StarCraft Brood War. I'm a real old gamer. Played that competitively for a long time. Chess was my first like big competitive game after that. But I've competed in a lot of things. Hearthstone was kind of a big one for me for a while in the classic format, but also some other ones. Basically, any dead game for old people. I like playing those. But just generally, always been a fan of competitive games. Um, really like teaching to kids, like working with other people, helping them out, learn new things, and just generally kind of building bridges, finding folks that have similar interests, similar hobbies, and just trying to find ways to connect them and have us all kind of work together.
Cool. Yeah. What would be your advice for someone who's just starting out in chess and wants to go from, the beginner ELO up to wherever you're at? What would the progression look like for them?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, it kind of depends on your age, depends on your interest, depends on how much free time you have. Most of the students that I work with are really little kids. I like to take like talented beginners in kindergarten, first, second grade, and kind of build like a relationship with them that can kind of nurture their growth. Ultimately, in any game, really, I would say the best advice I can give is just play what you're interested in. The people that tend to have the most success in games are typically those who show a consistent interest and continue to build on that interest in good educational ways. For those that are starting off in chess, just getting started to begin with, there are a lot of free resources online. They don't need a private coach necessarily. Of course, for like littler kids or maybe like fourth, fifth graders, you really want to watch out for like clickbait. That tends to be kind of a common pitfall of folks nowadays that are trying to improve at chess. So you go on like YouTube Reels and you start seeing these people that are like, "Hey, this is how you can beat all your friends at chess," and in just 5 moves. Stuff is not particularly good for the community and can sort of give the wrong impression. But there are a lot of solid, educational resources out there. So educating oneself is always good, really in any activity. Self-determination, that drive to become better, that just sort of intrinsic ability to figure things out for yourself and know how to make progress. That's always a very important skill in any game. So I would recommend that, once a person gets to a certain point, seeking out guidance from somebody else can help. Ultimately, I have a lot of really successful students, and the big thing I try and do is I can't teach them everything, but I can
Mhm.
tell them where to go to find the right things. And I can tell them this is a thing that you should be working on. This is a thing that's really kind of a waste of your time right now. Um, so finding somebody there to just guide that journey, it doesn't have to be somebody that's the know-all guru of everything chess or everything any game. But just finding somebody that can help out, that's been through it, that has the experience, the wisdom, um, just to be able to impart good knowledge so that somebody doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. That can be important. But I'd say for anybody starting out, if you like chess, go play chess and go learn from your mistakes. Analyze your games afterward. Figure out what you did wrong. It's no different than any other competitive game. You try and analyze your own weaknesses and get better because ultimately we make a mistake every time we play a game of any sort, and that mistake is correctable. And once we correct that mistake, we open up ourselves to a whole new world of things. So, self analysis, I would say, is usually a pretty important one.
Yeah, I've noticed that chess has like this long culture of, they call it what, punting, like when you make a mistake
Mhm.
and then you go and you find your mistake. And I think chess lends itself well, more than most games, to like taking responsibility.
Absolutely. When you're in any one-on-one game, it really narrows down the possibilities of like what happened in a game like Hearthstone, or any RNG game. You can sometimes chalk a loss up to, oh, I made the right decision, I think, but like I got crappy cards, and therefore I lost. But for the most part in chess, it's a game of perfect information. So you know that you made a mistake when you lose a game, right? There's no blaming it on your opponent. You just have to take responsibility for that. And over time, it builds, especially for like kids that are getting started in it earlier, it builds kind of an emotional fortitude where we have to be sort of dispassionate and cultivate this mindset where we're ultimately responsible for the things that we do wrong. And there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. That's how we get better. But we do have to kind of find a way to acknowledge our own successes and feel happy about that whenever we achieve something. We should be proud of ourselves or have folks around us that can help us feel that sense of pride. But also to be able to say, like, it's my responsibility ultimately to analyze my games and get better. And if I don't do that, then I'm going to be hard stuck at whatever elo I'm at. So yeah, absolutely, kind of learning to learning to become our own person and learning to become self-sufficient. That's a big part of chess. That's a big part of life. Improvement in anything that we want to do. We ultimately kind of just have to own up to what we've done wrong and accept that we can't have an emotional attachment to the result of the game or to any result. It's just an opportunity to grow.
Yeah, it sounds like chess could really be a positive force in kids' lives. Do you have any memorable stories to share where chess like really improved your students' lives, or you saw something unique happen with chess?
Yeah, I mean, in my own personal life, certainly, I've played a lot of chess tournaments, and had a lot of tough losses. Last round of a tournament, got a big trophy on the line, and like mess it up. Um, I guess I would say, one memorable thing for me when I was maybe like 20 years ago, something like that. I played in the national championships, and for my section, I was like the highest rated person in that section. I went into the tournament. I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to kick ass. I'm going to beat everybody. And I did atrociously. I had like 2.5 or 3 out of 7 points. It's really bad. And after that, I kind of realized that it wasn't very productive for me to kind of try and punch down and play players that maybe were worse than I was. And so from that point on, I only ever played competitive games if possible, but chess specifically. I'd only ever sign up for sections that were higher rated than my own. So I would be the lowest rated player in the section just about every time. And that to me built up this uh, the I kind of a mindset where I was never afraid to lose anymore. In fact, it was kind of invigorating to lose sometimes. But a result like 2 out of 5 would be good. I'd still gain rating points if I was the lowest rated player in the section, and I would just go out there and compete. So I would say for me that was a really big one. For the students that I teach, I'm pretty picky about the kids that I work with privately. Work with a lot of kids like at chess clubs and stuff like that, and to them, I just wish them all the success in the world, but it doesn't really mean much. But for the kids that are really, really driven and really talented, they kind of make their own path. I'm there to be kind of an emotional support when they lose, and they do lose a lot, but they're able to quickly kind of learn how to compartmentalize those things and to just become better at losing. So I'd say for all my students, it's kind of universal. I don't know if I could really pick out a specific instance of somebody that had like a hard loss and then came back with the Cinderella story. Like these kids that I teach, they just win more games than they lose. A lot of tournaments, they still haven't hit their peaks, and they have a pretty positive outlook. I think it's important whenever you're dealing with kids or really anybody, tell them you're proud of them. Tell them they did great. Tell them when they lose a game, like it's okay. I lost tens of thousands of chess games in my life. Who cares, right? It's the ultimate trajectory, that kind of farsightedness that we're really trying to think about. So, I would say for the kids that I work with, it's more of a continuing process rather than like an aha moment for them. And just this weekend, I had some kids that didn't have the greatest tournament, even though they were very high seated in the tournament. And that's exactly what I did. Is I just told them, "Hey, I'm really proud of you still. No problem. You pick yourself back up when you lose some games. We'll think about the next tournament. We don't have to dwell on our mistakes. Let's learn from them together. But let's not, take it hard. Let's not blame ourselves for that kind of stuff. Blaming people doesn't do anything. Just acknowledge we made mistakes, and it should be exciting for them that the next time they get into this position or they, whatever opening it was that they played, that they'll know exactly what to do, and then they'll feel that sense of confidence. It might be a couple months down the road until they see that position again, but when they do, if they remember it, then they're going to feel that sense of accomplishment. So really kind of just giving them that farsightedness. It's like I say, it's a continuous process to support somebody like that.
Cool. Have you taught anyone who has surpassed you at the game?
Not yet, but they're trying.
They're trying. Okay.
They're trying. Uh, I do have some talented kids that I am absolutely guaranteed will surpass me at some point. They're still pretty young. One of my students just got third place at the national championship, second grader. That's very talented, and I have no doubt that he will surpass me within the next maybe 5 years, something like that. And to me, that's not a bad thing at all. I would be super proud of any kid that could go further than I did in chess. After all, I got started pretty late. I was 11 years old when I started. A lot of the kids that I teach will be playing chess for 5 years before they ever get to the point where I just started in chess. So, um, little kids, good sponges, they absorb information very well. And yeah, I'm proud of every kid that I work with, and even more proud if they're really able to achieve, certain rating that I could definitively say, "Hey, you're better than I am," and great. Let's find you a grandmaster to go take chess lessons from, and you know, love to keep in touch and go root for you at tournaments. But maybe I'm not the best person to teach them anymore.
What do you think of the rise of chess celebrities recently? Like Hikaru and people like that.
Oh, it's a complicated situation. Yeah, I'm a bit torn. There are some content creators, guys like Daniel Naroditsky, who I have a lot of respect for, and they make instructional lessons. They're good about just staying on track and being honest to the profession. I can't say I'm a big Hikaru fan. We're the same age, ancient, and kind of grew up in like we didn't like see each other at a lot of tournaments. He was playing like big national tournaments and stuff, but he played online a lot. Was not like well known for being a good sport. Would just kibitz to the people that were observing the game and talk shit about his opponents. Super unproductive, super unprofessional in my mind. And there are a lot of chess players that do that. Chess streamers that they just want to meme on people. They're there for entertainment. And ultimately, it may seem like as adults, when we watch that kind of content, we can tell the difference between like somebody that's just, kind of shit posting in chess and somebody that's, taking it seriously. But kids can't. And so I see the direct harm of that, where streamers like Eric Rosen or Hikaru or others will play like these crazy, stupid openings just for viewers. And the viewers will be like, oh, he won with the Bong Cloud opening. It's just funny to hear a kid say. But they'll do stuff like that, and they'll mimic this behavior. And it's not a very healthy mindset. They can't tell the difference between education and entertainment. So they'll think, hey, this guy Hikaru is so good. He's like world number 4. And, how can he possibly suggest something that's wrong? And it's like, well, he does it for the viewers, right? He does it because he wants more subscriptions. I'm not trying to knock the guy for, trying to make a living at chess. But at the same time, like, it does seem like it's harmful for kids. Just like certain television programming can be harmful for kids, even though it's entertaining and fun for them. So, yeah, I'm always sort of wary of chess content creators. I like those that provide a good educational environment and are, just let their subscribers grow naturally. For those that are in it for the shock value and the memes and, just getting kids to watch their stuff, I'm not a big fan. But it helps popularize chess, and one of the reasons that I'm gainfully employed is because there are a lot of really driven kids that sometimes do watch stuff like this and sign up for clubs and camps and lessons. So I do benefit in some ways from it. I just kind of wish that those guys could tone it down a little bit and, like, I don't know, be better role models. Like that's what kids need. They don't need a role model that's a mimi streamer. They need a role model that's like somebody that's a responsible adult that can, teach them to go do whatever they're going to do. Truth is, most kids don't become grandmasters. Nobody does. I mean, it's very rare for a person to like achieve that highest level of success in chess. And sometimes they lose sight of that. My goal when I'm teaching kids is to say, I don't care how good you want to be at chess. You want to be a hard stuck 900 for your whole life, but you really love the game and you understand how to use that game as a metaphor to solve problems in your real life. That's great. That's what they're going to need because they're going to have a career that's not chess related. But sometimes they get the wrong idea. They think they're going to become a grandmaster by following these 3 easy steps that all grandmasters hate, or whatever the clickbait is. And it gives them a false impression. And that's just, you're emotionally letting a child down when you give them that kind of expectation of themselves. So, yeah, I would say on the whole, kind of maybe a negative view on chess celebrities, but I don't mean to diminish that. Some of them are very good and were well worth watching.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like when you teach people, you have a very pragmatic view of the role the game plays in their life, whether it's like the thing they'll do professionally or the thing they might teach or the thing they'll just do as a hobby.
Hmm.
And so you modulate what you teach them based on that, which I think is great.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
do you ever find that you're also helping people with like improving outside of chess, like improving as a person, improving at life in general? What is that like?
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. Some student teacher relationships are really special. And sometimes we get off topic, and sometimes I come to a chess lesson and this kid is not engaged at all. And do I want to force chess on them? Do I want to say, hey, you need to pay attention? Like when I'm teaching you something, I'm only here for an hour. So you have to, your parents pay me a lot of money to come here. I never say shit like that. Instead, it's like, okay, what's on your mind? What can we talk about? That maybe is some other thing in your life. Maybe you can't talk about it with your parents, or it's awkward, or maybe it's something that you can't talk about with your friends. I try to find ways to just talk to the kids and figure out what's up and learn a little bit more about them as people and try and remember those things. If a kid tells me they play soccer, I don't say, cool, it's good that you play soccer. I say, what position do you play in soccer? And I try and, if they're a midfielder, then I say, well, that's great. You're right there in the center of the action. Your team relies on you to be an intermediary between the defense and the offense. If they're a goalie, I say, well, that's really, fantastic that you're willing to be the person that'll take a hard kicked ball to the face in order to save your team a goal, right? Whatever it is, I really try to listen to the kids and kind of, understand what their life is like, because chess is just a little piece of the puzzle for them, right? They're all interested in different things. Their interest in the game will wax and wane. As soon as a kid learns about Minecraft, they're all of a sudden a little bit less interested in chess. So yeah, I just try and roll with it. I don't try and force anybody to play this game. And in fact, the worst students to have are the ones that aren't interested in the game anymore, and their parents force them to take lessons. And it's like, I don't have an interest in teaching a kid a game they don't want to play. Right? I want to be there. I want to be there as like a part of their life, not focused on making chess their entire life, no matter how talented they are. And it's okay if a really talented kid decides one day they don't want to play chess anymore. I tell them that's fine. We all take breaks. Maybe you come back to it later. Don't ruin your passion for the game by repeatedly, having lessons and you know, trying to play chess when you don't want to, when you want to be hanging out with your friends. There's a certain age. Kids don't want to be going to chess tournaments anymore on the weekend. They want to be playing video games with their buddies. So I try to be really sensitive to that kind of stuff. Career wise, I mean, games are problem solving, right? Good games. There are some shitty games out there, right? I'm not talking about like Candy Crush, but good competitive games. They build character. They help us understand ourselves emotionally, and they help just understand the logical process of solving a problem, especially under time pressure. You guys got a clock on your game when you're playing chess. So it's like, how do you take what you know, assess the position, find a list of candidate moves or ideas in any other context, and calculate those through, and then ultimately make a decision and be responsible for that decision that we made. That's a universal skill set that I can teach to kids. And I never stop reminding them that whether they're interested in math or reading or music or whatever other activities they do, that this relates to those also. This is you can learn things from chess or any other game that universally can be used as metaphors in order for somebody to understand stuff like that.
Yeah, I remember working with a League of Legends coach actually from New Zealand, and the lessons he ended up teaching me about the game really applied to life. Like one thing that he taught me over the course of multiple games, because I was making this mistake a lot, he said something like, um, he told me to learn to be more worried about missing opportunities than making mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good piece of advice. Um, as little kids are getting interested in like taking their first steps in chess, one of the things they do is develop this repertoire of openings that they play. And an opening is kind of a manifestation of a person's chess personality, so to speak. So if I'm an all-out aggressive attacking player, there are certain moves that we play in the opening that can kind of just initiate attacking positions. If I'm a really kind of defensive player, I do well when somebody is attacking me. I'm good at solving problems, not creating them. Then there's an opening repertoire for them. But the problem is when most kids get started, they all learn the same opening, and it's not usually a good reflection of their personality. So I tell them, go out there and explore. I'll show you some different things. Then go play it. Go play this opening in a tournament and go crash and burn. Go lose all your games. I don't care, right? We're not focused on the results of the short term. We're focused on finding something that fits in the long term. And like you're saying, if you never take a chance, if you don't go outside of your comfort zone and you don't establish what are the boundaries, the upper bound of how crazy and aggressive I can be, and the lower bound of how like, solid and turtly and defensive I can be, you're never going to know where those boundaries are. And then it becomes kind of this uncertain process. And we never really want to regress and just stay in our little shell of whatever we're comfortable with. We want to open things up and then bring them back a little bit, find out where that exact range is of, what's comfortable to us, what's good for us, what's causing us success, and what also has opportunities to grow as well. But yeah, absolutely. We have to try and fail before we can do those things. And every failure is something that we can definitely point to and be like, here's the mistake that I made. Was it a personality conflict? I just don't understand how to play chess this way. Or I just don't understand how to farm top when I want to be fighting. I want to be team fighting all the time. Right. Whatever it is, we kind of have to open ourselves up to that first before we can really learn to move past that thing.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. What would be your advice for people as well, like who just want to get better at whatever they might be doing or at life in general? Because it sounds like you've built this perspective that's very well balanced. Where, for example, I see a lot of parents who would be proud if their kid was addicted to chess, but not proud if their kid is playing Hearthstone all the time. You know?
Yeah. It's hard. I mean, you're dealing with social biases that parents have. You can't, a lot of those are outside of your control. I try to just, be as honest as possible with the parents. And sometimes that means that you're advocating for their child when it seems like you're both advocating for their child, right? They want the long-term success of their kid and they don't care about the interim consequences of that, like a kid losing their passion for the game. For me, it's like, a little bit more organic. And it sets you up at an impasse, very, specific conversations that kind of are unique to each situation. So it's hard. It's definitely hard to have those, but honesty is the most important thing. You have to be honest with a parent. You have to use that experience and say, I've seen kids like your child before that were talented and had a lot of potential, but instead of recognizing that, hey, maybe that just means they're a smart kid. Why don't you apply it to whatever game you want? As opposed to, why don't we just apply it to chess? And even if you don't like the domain in which you're learning, it's still important for you to continue as a chess player. Like I said at the very beginning, if you don't have a passion for the game, every moment of studying chess is going to feel like torture. And that's not fair to put a child through. So I have discussions with parents like that sometimes and just have to, kind of ground us again and say, it's not a missed opportunity just because your child has a lot of talent. It's not a missed opportunity if they don't like the game anymore, for them to stop taking lessons or for them to move on to something else or just take chess a little bit less seriously. Find other activities to do on the weekends and things like that. But it is hard. I mean, we have a lot of very driven parents in the area I live here in the Seattle area that are very successful professionally themselves. And a lot of them come from cultures where it's just expected that you work your ass off, and whether you like it or not, that's kind of your path forward in chess. Not really how I was raised. So I kind of bring my own perspective, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. That's why it's a discussion, not me just telling them something. Um, so yeah, I don't know. It's always a tough situation matching the parents' expectations with what I see as what's best for a child.
Yeah, I've spoken with a lot of parents who are like in Asian cultures, and it really seems to be like this cycle of perpetrating forced hobbies. Like they grew up with the violin or the piano, and then now their kid has to take, dance lessons or something. And
Yeah,
it's just at what point will people realize that, you really have to like what you're doing if you want to be great at it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so the next thing I want to ask you is, have you ever had your coaching influence the parent of a student somehow?
Oh, that's a good question. I hope like every time I talk to them, I have some parents that sit in on the lessons, and for the most part, it's good. They can, help kind of, slap the kid when they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing, like playing around with the pieces or not paying attention. But yeah, I try to always include the parent and help them understand what the process is moving forward and correct sometimes the misconceptions that a parent will have too. Most, all of my kids are from Asian cultures. I don't have any white kids that I teach private chess lessons to. So, I deal with that cultural expectation. I'm a white dude myself, so I didn't, again, grow up with that exactly. And so, yeah, sometimes, the parents' expectations of their child really are tempered by their own experience. And I try to get them to understand, like emotionally, this is where I see that what's best for your child. I I I don't know if I can say any parent has completely changed their mind about how they treat their child. But those micro corrections over time of saying like, I get what you're saying here that you want your kid to do this. But I don't think that that's what's best in my experience. Over time, I think that those kinds of experiences with parents do maybe change their outlooks a little bit, but it's really hard to say. I don't think I've had any amazing halcyon moments where a parent has said, geez, you made me totally rethink my parenting style. Most of those parents were already on board with what I was doing anyway, and they, just be nice about it, and we're already kind of on the same wavelength.
Okay, so most of your influence has been with the kids. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah,
They are the most like open to it.
yeah. And parents also like, uh, I don't know. I mean, a lot of them don't play chess, so they don't know. They're kind of looking to me for guidance as like the professional in the room. So I don't really have too many problems with mixed expectations with parents. We do, they do still come up. But just in general, like a lot of times they'll just listen to me and trust that I know what's best for them. And if you have a track record of being successful like that and what you're saying makes sense and you're being honest, not just like lying, trying to get their kid to make like quick improvement where they're just going to crater in the long term, um, they'll trust you. And I don't really have too many problems with those expectations.
Moving on to Hearthstone, you mentioned you played Classic as a format. What was your favorite Classic deck?
Oh, I think everybody probably knows me for this. That was in the classic community. So I had kind of a homebrew aggro paladin deck um, that it never caught on too much. It was a very difficult deck to play. A couple folks tried it out in tournaments with limited success. We didn't see a ton of success with it. It was a deviation from kind of the previous lists that included 2 copies of Avenging Wrath and some heavy top end stuff. This one was pretty refined, lower curve, included some cards like Elven Archer, which is a real card in Classic, but included some cards like that, fewer Blessing the King, like 1 copy Blessing the Kings, 1 copy of Consecration, which is kind of surprising, and um, and really not much else at the top end. So really good at emptying the hand, Divine Favor, get back into the game, but also could play the long game. Play against a warrior, you can hero power every single turn and just kind of deplete their resources eventually. But yeah, that was kind of my big one. I only played in one tournament because after that I did all the casting and organization, not all of the organization, but I do casting and organization for the tournaments after that. So I only had one opportunity to bring it out there. It went undefeated. And I was really happy about that result. And definitively undefeated. It really performed well against the field. It was a good meta deck. And like, there's always a special place in my heart for that deck. A lot of refinement went into it. It was also a deck that brought me to rank 1 legend a couple of times as well. Mid to late season rank 1 legend, not like first day. So yeah, I mean it was good. I liked that deck a lot. Just generally, I kind of like Paladin for in Classic a lot because it's an underplayed, severely underplayed class.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. My favorite deck was always Handlock in Classic, and
Hmm.
I just liked the way you could be like both a control deck and also a combo deck with the
Yeah,
Leroy Power Overwhelming and Faceless combo.
yeah,
But you could also like play the long game with giants and have really big minions and stuff.
yeah, totally. That was actually another underplayed deck in Classic. Unfortunately, like we didn't see a lot of handlocks in Classic tournaments. And I felt like it was a deck. There are certain people that are just really good at certain decks. There are a lot of just really good Druid players that the margin of error in their games was very, very low. But for Handlock, there were not, surprisingly enough, especially given that Handlock was a pretty popular deck back in the day, there were not really many experts in the community that you could point to and say that person knows exactly what to do in every situation as Handlock. And it's a tricky deck to play. You get yourself down to 10 health in a format where Leroy is 4 mana. Well, it's pretty scary. If you don't have taunts left, or if you're not able to evaluate your opponent's resources properly, end up getting double, Thalnos double eviscerated to the face. And there are a lot of ways to lose with that deck, a lot of ways to play idealistically rather than practically with it, where it's like, oh shit, I want to slam that giant, taunt him up, right? You get Black Knighted, and okay, maybe that was a bad decision. It took a lot of skill to play that deck. But I always loved playing Handlock as well. It was a it was a really fun deck.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me to look at the game now and see all the changes they've made because the power level has changed so much. Like Black Knight is now a 4 mana 4/4 instead of a 6 mana 4/5, and it still sees no play, as a
Hmm.
deck card or anything like that. Because now
Yeah,
removing taunts is not that hard for most decks, and it's like stats are no longer the big thing. It's other
yeah,
mechanics.
yeah,
So that's really interesting.
yeah. I mean, I felt like the power creep in that game was kind of unfortunate. Before Classic came out, I played a lot of Standard, a little bit of Wild, but I was mostly a Classic player, eventually. And that's one of the things that I disliked about it was that you didn't have to pay attention to every detail, like the stats of a minion when you're building a deck. It was just kind of like, here's the cookie cutter deck. I mean, Blizzard made basically 30 cards that you would put in your deck that, for the Quest Rogue, for example. It's like, how many variations of SI Quest Rogue did you see? Not really any, right? You play all the SI cards, and maybe there's one or two tech cards in there, but, rarely. And I think that kind of bothered me. It took a lot of the skill out of building a deck. But in addition to that, it also just diminished some of the more important things in the game to me. One of those things is hand reading. It's a skill that I think is very underappreciated in general in Hearthstone, of like kind of being a detective and following that little trail of breadcrumbs and thinking like, what is my opponent holding in their hand? What is that leftmost card that's been there since the mulligan that they didn't throw away? Like, what are they planning with that card? And setting up like 2-turn lethal. I know it's still a thing in Standard, but like, you don't have maybe as many opportunities to consistently try and enforce 2-turn lethal in Standard as opposed to Classic, where it's like, can I get somebody in range and can I do the math? Because you have fewer charge minions. Yeah, sure, you got Leroy, but you don't really have too much other burst damage. It's not like you can clone a whole board of whatever that guy was, Captain Smite or something, the chargy pirate guy. Get to do stuff like that in Classic. So yeah, there were just a lot of more refined elements I felt in the game that made it feel a little bit more like chess, where you I guess can predict a little bit more accurately what your opponent's going to do rather than like, hey, I just built a board of 10-10s. Oh, you cleared the whole thing and then built a board of 10-10s yourself. Okay, I'll clear your board of 10-10s and build another one. Like that to me is not fun. It's not interactive. Um, it's really not educational, I suppose. And I'm not looking to educate others in Hearthstone, but I'm certainly looking to educate myself in whatever game I play. I want to learn important lessons that I can take from that game and bring to others. And in the Classic format, I was able to do that. In other formats, it's kind of like, cool, did you, get your Hunter quest done on turn 3 or turn 4 in Wild? Like, they're really like not super interactive. So yeah, I miss those things certainly about Classic.
Yeah, I think Blizzard added Murloc Holmes as a card for the hand readers like yourself.
It's cool that they sometimes have like taken steps to maybe try and incentivize like better prophylactic play, better understanding of your opponent's hand, things like that. Yeah, it's cool. They've made some attempts. I think it's better off as just a generic skill that we use every single turn all the time than it is, as just like, oh, a single card that I can use. But I'll take it. I haven't played Hearthstone for a long time, so I don't really have my finger on the pulse of all of the card changes or what's going on in Standard anymore.
By the way, do you know Maxibone?
I watched his interview, but don't personally know him.
Okay, yeah, because he was interesting to interview because a lot like the chess kids you mentioned who've been playing 5 years by the time they're 11, he was basically playing Hearthstone that long,
Hmm.
Hearthstone and Magic. So he is sort of a new generation of, or maybe not new, I don't know, but it's interesting that he's growing up with card games the way other kids might grow up with chess or something else.
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, a lot of the kids nowadays they grow up with Roblox and Minecraft, which I don't see as quite as educational or worth the time. I mean, they have their own, like especially Minecraft. Yeah, it's got some things that are good for kids. Roblox maybe not so much, kind of like child labor and microtransactions, things like that.
Yeah.
But Hearthstone and Magic are great for kids. And I have some kids that are not super interested in chess anymore, and we learn other games. We learn card games, not necessarily digital card games, but like physical card games like 52 card deck, play like Hearts or Gin Rummy, games like that, that I can teach them. And it's like, let's just take the problem solving skills from one context, move them to another, use the skills that you have. Oh, you have a really great memory. Okay, I'm going to teach you how to count cards in Hearts. Like, here's how you keep track of the cards in your head. Let's practice and see how many you can remember. And then we'll play another game, see if you can remember one more card. So if you could remember 10 this time, let's try and remember 11 next time. I think those skills are great for kids. Um, they're all things that can be used in another context, and that's what's important to me. Is that competitive games? I'm all for brutality and violence as long as it's simulated, and competition as long as it's simulated. Because at the end of the day, we can fight, hard. We can do whatever we want, and then we shake hands and we show good sportsmanship. We become friends and we analyze together, learn things, and get to integrate that into something greater. And card games are good for that. So usually one on one or four people that are sitting there playing a card game. It's always educational to play stuff like that.
Yeah, on the topic of sportsmanship, I have noticed that like toxicity is becoming a growing issue in online gaming.
Hmm.
And I'm not really sure what we do about it because from my perspective, I'm kind of like you in that I like learning and analyzing. So like, I played this MMO New World when it came out a few years ago, and I remember I did something very non-traditional, which was we had like a war, which was like these 50 player versus 50 player battles,
Hmm.
and I messaged the leader of the other side, and I was like, "Do you want a VOD review?" And he was like, "Sure, let's do it." And then I did that, and my teammates were kind of mad at me because they felt like I
Hmm.
was giving away strategies or something.
Yeah.
But they eventually came around, and it was actually really fun to see the battle from their perspective, look at their replays and what their communications were.
Yeah.
And I realized, like, okay, we're both benefiting, and ultimately we're both enjoying the game, which is good for us because we need more people to enjoy the game. But that seems to be like a lost, I don't know what to call it, a lost sense of sportsmanship in the modern era. How do you think
Yeah.
we might bring that back?
Oh, that's a really tough one. Sportsmanship is super important to me. It's hard because part of that perspective just comes from wisdom and experience. Like, I've played chess for 25 years now, and I would never have maintained my interest in that game for so long if I solo bobbed it the whole time. What's really been valuable to me about that, and what's helped me grow, not just teaching myself, is making friends along the way. Those are the people that keep the game interesting, people I can send a puzzle to, and they're like trying to solve it, right? And we kind of, or we see a position, we try and solve it together. Those are the kinds of like special relationships that we get when we participate in activities. And it's something that tends to be lost on younger folks because they just don't understand that, like, you're going to maybe play some of these games your whole life. Chess is special in that respect, is because it's, kind of timeless. But digital games like League of Legends or something, even that, you might play League of Legends for 10 years with your buddies. Do you want to be an asshole to your teammates and everybody in the game every time? If you do, the game's going to cease to become interesting. The only thing that you can focus on in that context is your own success. And if you can't break, diamond, then you're going to leave the game and stop playing. It's like there's a lot to learn from a game like that. If you had networked and been friends with people and shown good sportsmanship, you'd make friends. And those friends might be able to say, here's the like one mistake that you're making that's preventing you from getting from like plat one to diamond. And even just in and of itself, that can be like a huge thing. people that just kind of help us get over the humps. So, how do we fix it? I don't know. I mean, stop putting so many noobs on my team is how we fix it. No, I'm kidding. Um, I don't know. It's really hard. I think sometimes just having somebody there to guide and tell good stories, having fewer content creators online that are irresponsible, looking for a quick buck, looking for clicks and subs because they want to post a video of them being a jackass to their team. That's not helpful, right? That's not helpful at all for kids. But that's the environment they grow up in, and that's the media they consume for entertainment and for educational purposes. God knows why, but they do. And it's the experience they have inside the game. So everything on every level is kind of pointed toward toxicity. Game creators themselves can take steps, like League of Legends, I think, has done more decent job recently of like giving you feedback when somebody you reported gets banned, right? And now it's like you log in and like 4 people are banned that you reported, like the guy that was AFK texting, during a big team fight, and like the guy that was flaming you for giving up first blood, and like, where you're one auto attack away from killing somebody. Like those people are getting banned now. So I think that the game creators have some obligation, but as people like that are content creators too, I think that demographic really needs to do better and provide more role model and kind of leadership, um, uh, kind of things to kids or to whatever viewers. Right, they're immature adults too, but they could do better as well to improve sportsmanship. Maybe they're just jackasses that never make friends in real life and are insecure and lash out online. It's not particularly uncommon for people like that to go create a YouTube channel of them shooting people in Call of Duty and memeing on them and teabagging them. Like, I mean, those people always exist. Parents have, a significant say in it too. If they're disconnected from what their child does online, then they're going to let their kid see that kind of stuff. If they're really engaged with what their kid does online and maybe even want to queue up for a game of League with them, like maybe they can help their kid contextualize those things. Although I don't know any kids that play League with their parents, so maybe not. Not so popular.
Yeah, so it sounds like we have to be fostering healthier communities because community is the way that people really build, I guess, a long-term investment in an
Yeah,
environment, and then they won't be so mean to others.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
guess also
totally.
we have to vote with our wallet, so to speak, by following and supporting the content creators who are not toxic, who are actually analytical and helpful.
Yeah, yeah, it's hard. It's an uphill battle, right? Like algorithms are not built on YouTube or Twitch or wherever it is, or TikTok. They are not built to find boring educational content, right? It's the most shocking thing, the most action-packed thing, which doesn't necessarily mean like cool explosions, just action as far as somebody doing something right now.
Drama.
Here's my thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's just super. Yeah, it's really not helpful. But they see people being successful that way, and that's what they do, right? It's hard to tell, what a person's life is like when they can just project a simulated image of themselves. And kids don't understand that that guy that's being a jackass in League of Legends and getting a million likes is probably going to be irrelevant in like a year when the shock value from the stupid shit they do online, like, wears off and somebody else knows how to shock viewers even better. Um, they don't understand, that's sort of the way things go. Hopefully over time they do. But how are you gonna create better communities of kids? I have no idea.
Yeah, it seems like it's a race to the bottom if you're trying to innovate on shock value versus trying to innovate on like something that actually builds long-term communities. It's harder to do, but more worthwhile. I've been grappling with this in the podcast space because there's a lot of pressure for me to like clickbait and try to create like emotional reactions. And yeah, you're right. The algorithm really pushes for that. It doesn't
Hmm.
really like, calm, measured conversation that's like balanced and not polarizing and things like that. Um,
Yeah,
but I,
it's
yeah,
true.
but I found it is like consistent over time. You tend to find the audience that likes that stuff. So yeah, it just takes more time, I guess, but it's worth it.
Yeah, there was a husband and wife author. They wrote this book back in the 1970s. It talks about a topic that's a little bit different. It talks about like disaster fatigue. But one of the things their solution to it is like when you see all of these problems in the world, and you know you can't solve all of them. Their solution is to do what they call embrace your helplessness. And I've always really liked this idea that you acknowledge that you can't do anything about all of this. You can't stop online toxicity by yourself. There's no, steed great enough to carry a white knight like that. But if you embrace that you're helpless to stop it, you at least feel some obligation to do something. And that's a good start, right? So in the Hearthstone community and the classic community, I mean, we already had like a bunch of old people that like content like that. But the videos that we produced was like, 2.5 hours long. And it was an interview of somebody, a little bit about their life, about their history of playing Hearthstone, going over their deck choices, stuff like that. We do winners interview at the end of a long tournament, whatever it was. And the feedback that we got, and the feedback that I would get personally, and like random DMs from people, was really amazing. To be honest, I mean, we just had a lot of people say, "Oh, this is great content. Like, keep it coming." Didn't have anybody being a jackass in the comment section, right? It was like you said, those people kind of naturally will gravitate toward that. And it may be a smaller community, but what am I going to do? Get like 5 million views on like a classic Hearthstone video and like change people's minds about sportsmanship? No, they're not interested in watching that. But for the few that do, maybe it trickles down. Maybe it spreads out a little bit. Maybe they, just are reinforcing being a good person. But maybe it can help some people change their minds. And even if it doesn't, just intrinsically, there's some good to doing that, right? I don't always have a moral obligation to do the right thing or the best thing or the most honest thing. But if we try, if we idealize that and work toward it, then who knows? Maybe we do make some progress.
Yeah, on that subject, it took me basically my whole life. I'm 28 now, and it was last year that I discovered that I love doing this podcast thing and interviewing people and hearing their stories and all of that. But I tried a whole bunch of like 5 or 6 different careers before that didn't stick. So,
Mhm.
what advice do you have for people to really find the thing for them in life that they would be willing to do for like many lifetimes?
Man, that's a hard one because I was in the same boat. Like when I spent most of I'm 36. I spent most of my 20s as an EMT. I worked in an emergency room. It was a very high pressure job, lots of traumatic things to be seen. The sensation of touching a dead child definitely makes my teaching chess to children now in a whole different context. And it was just part of the journey for me, but I don't know if that was ever something I wanted to do. And I worked in the tech industry for a while, doing project management, software development, and only a few years ago happened upon chess, a lifelong passion of mine, and had somebody push me toward it. My wife at the time, it was just like, who do you know? How do you do this, and who do you know, and who can you talk to? And it just happened for me. It was nice, but I kind of been waiting like 12 years of my professional life to get to that stage, which was hard. And I think a lot of people can lose hope early and say, I'm like, I'm 22 and I just graduated from college and, here's what I want to do, but I can't seem to get into this industry. Um, I would say the things that you do, find something that's emotionally fulfilling for you and let your life just build on that. You can always take those experiences of a service job or whatever it was that gave you just that intrinsic feeling that you're doing something good, and you can translate that onto something else, right? My experiences working in healthcare definitely impact my ability to work with kids. If I know how to redirect a patient with mental illness who maybe may has memory problems or trouble focusing, or are delusional or whatever it is, you don't deny their reality. Just the same way when a kid is having attention problems, you don't always just say, stop doing that, stop playing with your pieces, stop playing with your pencil or something. That doesn't work. Instead, you try to find something else that, maybe like, okay, kid wants to play with their pencil a bunch. Why don't you write down all the chess moves that we're doing here? Give them something productive, redirect them, right? But it's like all of those strategies that I learned in a different domain were still useful when I did kind of find my dream job. And so I would encourage anybody that's trying to find their niche, kind of knows what it is, but maybe doesn't, or doesn't know exactly how to get into it, to just don't be too hasty. You'll find your way there eventually. Hopefully, you have good friends, family members that can help guide you there, or provide inspiration and support on the way. But ultimately we don't find our dream job right away. If we did, the world would be a pretty happy place. And a lot of people work jobs they hate. And to quote Office Space, nobody wants to clean up shit for a living, mop toilets and stuff. So like some people are naturally not going to like their jobs. Not everybody gets to do their dream job, at least not right away. So I'd say be patient. It's hard to be patient for years on end as you're working a job you hate, but be patient. You know, Eventually, if you don't lose sight of your dream, then hopefully it comes to fruition. Also, don't be afraid of hard work. If your ideal job includes sitting back and earning millions of dollars while you do literally nothing, that job doesn't exist. There's a lot of grinding involved in really trying to do the thing that you want. And some people want something, but they're afraid of the hard work that it takes to get there. So being realistic is kind of important too.
Yeah, like with this podcast, I realized it might take 3 to 5 years of making content and seeing like no reward for it. And
Hmm.
at the beginning, I had to decide, okay, I'm okay with that. I'm willing
Hmm.
to do that. And then it
Yeah.
was easy to keep doing it because I knew what I was willing to sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it. Um, Embrace that helplessness, right? You don't necessarily have complete control over people's listening and viewing desires everywhere on the internet, right? All you can do is kind of believe in yourself and be common sense and reasonable and say like this is going to make a meaningful, impact on what I'm doing here. But be okay with failure, right? That's kind of the thing we learn from all games is if you're emotionally attached to the result of a game or of a career or things like that, you'll perform worse. You have to be able to view that thing dispassionately, just like anything else. Take a step back, take yourself out of the situation, and just do what's objectively correct, right? And you kind of cultivate that by saying, I may not be successful at this for a year or two or even longer. But eventually you know that somebody out there wants to listen, wants to view, right? They're curious, they want to reach out, and opportunities sometimes just fall in your lap. You do good things. Somebody out there is listening. Somebody out there finds it. Maybe they got a channel that's a million times bigger than yours, and they want to support your message. And all of a sudden, overnight, you become somebody that's your platform explodes. You never know when those opportunities happen. You can leave yourself open to them, but ultimately, it might take a while for those to come around.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard of Pirate Software. He's a Twitch streamer.
Haven't heard of them.
So he's been streaming game dev on Twitch for like 7 years. And it was only in the last few months that he kind of blew up on YouTube Shorts and a bunch of. It was funny. He went to his accountant, and his accountant was like, "Why does my grandson know you now?" And his grandson had been watching YouTube Shorts and came across this guy. So he's been really successful now. I think he's in the top 10 most sub Twitch channels. So he's like blown up in a
Hmm.
niche that usually does not see that much success, game development.
Hmm.
Um, but so he was doing it consistently with not that many results, but he kept doing it and he really liked what he was doing. So it makes sense to me that you have to be willing to do the thing for minimal reward or feedback, and then
Yeah,
you'll eventually
totally.
succeed.
Yeah. Do you want to do the thing because you want to be rich and famous, or do you want to do the thing because you like doing it? If you like doing it, it doesn't feel like a job,
Right.
right? It's maybe hard to make money at it, but if it doesn't feel like a job, then you'll be okay volunteering your time, nights and weekends, and whenever it is to, have that part be successful without having the expectation of success.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, is tempering your expectations, because I think the biggest way we get the biggest way we fail really is because our expectations are unrealistic. So we fail in our mind more than in reality.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, it's all mental, right? Your enjoyment of your job. If it weren't, then we would do, whatever job we was the first one that we'd apply for every job posting and pick a job and be happy with it. Right. But it's always an emotional connection to whatever your work is. You do it for 8 hours a day, right? Like you want to feel something from that that's positive, not negative. You like that experience to be a net positive rather than a net negative. And so, yeah, it is, there are always emotions intrinsically tied in it, but having our emotions tied into the job that we're doing and our emotions tied to the result of that are two different things. So it's good to have the long-term perspective of success from an objective standpoint, but also the short-term, do I enjoy this thing? That's equally important to just kind of satisfy ourselves emotionally.
Yeah. There's a book I read recently called Of Boys and Men.
Hmm.
And this was an interesting book because the author was discouraged by most of his, family, friends, community, because it was actually talking about boys' problems and male problems in a time when feminism is big and people want to focus on all of the inequality that women face.
Hmm.
But he went ahead and he wrote the book and he published it anyway. And there were a lot of interesting findings in there, and he actually proposed some solutions. But one of them that stood out to me was this idea that male teachers in elementary school, they more positively see boys' energy and hyperactivity, whereas female teachers are more likely to see it as disruptive and even like potentially, ADHD and leading to more
Hmm.
false diagnoses, which is problematic. And you said something interesting that made me think of that, which is, if a kid can't stop, playing with a pencil or writing or drawing, then give them, redirect that positively. And I think that's, yeah, that's something, really important about teaching young kids is just how do you use what they already have rather than trying to force what isn't there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, kids are fun to work with, but it's a real pain in the ass sometimes. And it's easy to isolate one kid and one circumstance and one success story. But when you teach a lesson to like 30 kids at once, keeping and redirecting every single one of them positively in the right ways is, well, it's honestly impossible. If
Yeah.
I knew the trick to it, then I'd be a lot better at my job, I guess. But we try to do things like that, and certainly, if you want to think of it in the context of like the male sex and the female sex and how they respond differently or how they act differently when they're kids, um, I see a significant number of differences between them for sure. When I teach online classes, for example, girls tend to be less willing to turn their cameras on in a Zoom call. They tend to be less willing to raise their hand and give an answer, even if they have the correct answer. But if I encourage them to answer through the Zoom chat instead, say, "Hey, type in your move. What's the move that you think is is the best here?" They'll be the first one to answer, and they'll get it right. So it is kind of sometimes about finding different ways that people want to interact with a teacher, ways they feel comfortable and safe. And we always want that, right? You don't want a student that feels left out because they're not given an opportunity to show their intelligence and demonstrate that to somebody. So finding ways to do that, but also, at times finding ways to like redirect the kid that can't possibly raise their hand to save their life, that just has to unmute themselves or shout out an answer and spoil it for everybody else, right? Redirecting stuff like that can be really tough too. For me, I don't really believe in negative reinforcement or things like that. If a kid has trouble with that, I say something like, "Hey, so and so, that was a really great answer, and I love your enthusiasm for chess. But let's just make sure that we raise our hand next time because I want to give everybody a chance to answer, just like I want to give you a chance to answer, when somebody else has an idea." And so I try to be gentle and say things like that. But certainly I have to have that talk with boys like 99% more times than I do with girls. They just tend to be a little bit less mature. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, that reminds me, have you heard of was it Laszlo Polgar and his
Hmm.
children? He like raised, I think, three like championship chess players, and he
Hmm.
wanted to prove that genius could be taught rather than like being purely genetic.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so Laszlo Polgar had these three daughters, Sophia, well, the oldest was Susan, then Sophia, then Judith. And yeah, taught them chess from when they were like 3 or 4 years old. And he was a grandmaster himself. And yeah, and he was successful. Judith Polgar hasn't played competitive chess since like 2000 and is still by far the highest rated woman that's ever played chess. Um, and yeah, I mean, there are certain things about that nurturing environment that we could probably point to and say that there are biases or there are holes in that theory that we can teach genius. Because first of all, they're dealing with a seasoned professional as a father. Second of all, these girls love chess, right? Sometimes you just kind of happen to have girls that like it. There are two Ukrainian sisters, Anna and Maria Muzchak, who are a similar story. They started playing chess when they were 3. Both their parents are professional chess trainers. They both went on to become women's world champions in rapid, blitz, and classical chess. So it's like this has happened a few times. But there are also people who have been professional chess trainers who have tried to force chess on their children who don't like it, and it doesn't work out. So we do get to hear the success stories, but it's not a broad survey of exactly, how many people have tried this and what the results are. We also might just be dealing with super high functioning kids, like just because they were raised in a disciplined environment in which they studied chess all the time doesn't mean they weren't naturally going to just succeed at whatever they were going to do. Otherwise they might have just been geniuses to begin with. So it's kind of hard to tell, but of course it's an inspiring story. These three sisters, two of them become grandmasters. Sophia becomes an international master. And yeah, I mean, it is always interesting to think how much can you nurture genius versus how much of it is just innate raw intelligence that somebody has. Personally, I think that we do whatever we can to cultivate smart kids' intelligence. Usually, I think engagement is the big one. One big difference that I noticed between the parents of the kids that I work with here that are all from Asian backgrounds and kids I've worked with in the past that are just run of the mill white bread kids is that parents are really invested in it. They sit there and they do the chess lessons with their kids. When their kid plays a tournament, right after the round, they're looking at their kid's notation pad, correcting everything, all the little mistakes, so that when they give it to me, I can see all the moves clearly, and I don't have to be a detective and figure out what move they didn't write down on their score pad. Um, and some parents do it in a really overwhelming way for their kids, and they're like the helicopter parent that's always hovering. And some parents do really great at it. They just provide the support without it seeming sinister in any way or malicious or overbearing. There's always a fine line with that. But certainly, a parent is a big part of the picture anytime we're talking about the success of a child, especially for those that are, prodigies in whatever domain they're in.
It's interesting that the parents are so deeply engaged. I think that's generally a good thing because it seems pretty common to me, that adults don't really respect children or their interests. They don't take it seriously. So they kind of just leave their kid alone for, the first 10 years and then maybe get interested, which just feels like a waste to me. So I think it's great that parents are engaged with their kids.
Yeah, yeah. I treat them like little adults. Like, you know, I don't. There are certain things that I'll do that are maybe a little bit more juvenile or maybe catered toward the little kids more. When I'm in a classroom, I say, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, and they all say 1, 2, eyes on you. Like, okay, I wouldn't do that in a room full of adults, right? But otherwise, when I'm teaching like a private lesson with a kid, I don't treat them any differently than I would an adult. We can still find common, things that we laugh at, right? Like make a goofy chess move, and like we both laugh. There's still lots of things we can share, but I never try to condescend to them, and I never try to pretend that I know everything about this subject. And I never contradict if they want to disagree with me. I'm open to that conversation. I never just tell them, you're wrong or something like that. I always try to treat them with the utmost respect, and because that's how I wanted to be treated as a kid too. I wasn't a full grown up, but I didn't like to be patronized by somebody, and I don't think these kids want to be patronized either. And some parents, like you're saying, they just ignore their kid until they're emotionally mature enough to, engage with. But that to me is just way too late, right? You can do that from an early age. You can be honest with a child. You don't have to hide the world from them, right? You can tell them about those things. You don't have to protect them. Um, I mean, from like online predators and stuff, sure, but like you don't have to protect them from the facts of the world, from the injustices that occur around them, or from whatever it is. I mean, I don't think it's necessary for parents to do that. I think it's always important to like treat kids with respect from a very young age.
Yeah, I've never understood this idea that, if you tell your kid that Santa isn't real, you'll destroy the magic of childhood or something. I've never found
Yeah,
that to be the case. Like kids
yeah,
are smarter than we realize. They probably already know.
right,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. When I was growing up, I remember my older brother telling me like he saw my parents with all these gifts in the closet in their parent closet before they were all wrapped up. So maybe they weren't from Santa. And I was like, who cares, right? I'm not here to figure out. As a kid, I don't give a shit if it came from Santa. I just care that I got a present, right? But yeah, there are certain fun things that can entertain children, but ultimately, no, we're not going to shatter their world. And if we would, we've probably raised our kids to be too emotionally fragile, not, and that's not a very good thing either, to like try to put them in a little glass bubble so that they don't have to interact with certain things in the world. And so they take all of their losses or scraped knee, just go ballistic when that happens, right? It's like prepare them for failure early. They're going to fail their whole life. So am I, right? We make mistakes in all kinds of things. Doesn't mean globally you fail at everything, but you try things out, you suck at it, you move on. Let kids have that experience too, and build up their emotional fortitude and tenacity so that when they get to a certain point in their life, they're not disappointed by their own failures and know how to contextualize it and move past it in a productive way, as opposed to being destroyed by it or being hurt by it.
Yeah, I've noticed kids are like naturally curious, and they're not really, they aren't born with this sense of shame. It's like we teach it to them because, kids will fall learning to walk, and they won't be, they'll cry for a bit if they got bruised or something, but they won't really be embarrassed about it. And they'll be wrong, and then they'll learn from it, and that's fine. But I think school, especially, it like punishes you for being publicly wrong. You feel embarrassed
Yeah,
and all of that.
yeah,
And then kids kind of grow up hiding their ideas and feeling like they have to only take a chance if they're guaranteed to succeed and things like that. It's
yeah,
really unfortunate.
yeah, absolutely. I like teaching group classes a lot, and so let's say I'm showing some chess puzzle to the kids, and first kid raises their hand and they give an incorrect answer, and I have a couple different responses to that depending on how incorrect the answer was. But I'm never like, no, that was a bad move. Don't do that. Somebody else come up with a better move. I never try to humiliate a kid like that. What I'll say is like, okay, I really love your idea. I told you to go for the active moves, the checks, the captures, the threats. And you tried that. You tried to make a checking move. So I really appreciate that you're looking at that. In this position, it's not necessarily the correct move. Let's see if we can find another one that's on that list and see if we can maybe use that same idea just in a different way. Or I might tell them, okay, you got the right move, but if we play it on this turn, we're going to lose to this. So instead, let's not throw that idea away. Let's try and work that into another variation. Let's try and resequence it. Pick a different move that can start us off, and then we'll play your idea. Things like that can help take that experience for a child that can be traumatizing. They raise their hand, maybe they're a shy kid, and they thought they got this one, and they raise their hand. And it's like the one thing that they offered was like, no. You can take that experience from something negative, humiliating, shameful, embarrassing, and instead put it in a different context and say, wow, you came up with a really good move. But let's not play it right now. Let's see if we can use that same idea somewhere else. And I find that's really positive, not only for the kid that got the wrong answer, but for the whole class. Because as soon as somebody else finds the preparatory move, then I can say, great teamwork, you two. So and so, you found the second move. So and so, you found the first move. And that's what we're all about here, is we work together as a team to solve problems. And we know that's how you work in real life too, right? You have to work on a team. You got to work with other people. You got to know how to work with somebody else and take their good idea and take your good idea and amalgamate the two and come up with something that's just a robust solution to something. So there are a lot of tricks to being able to do that for sure, and especially when you're dealing with kids. But I agree, it pains me when I see a child humiliated for doing something wrong. When it's like, what, like you never made a mistake in your life, right? Like, was humiliation the thing that convinced you not to do that? And even so, was there not a better way rather than feeling ashamed of yourself for giving a wrong answer? Is there not a better way maybe to just, have done that right?
Yeah, when you mentioned as well, like not patronizing kids, that reminded me of this psychotherapist, Adam Lane Smith. He's been like getting sort of in hot water on Twitter because he posts like controversial stuff and
Mm-hmm.
people disagree with him a lot. But he posted this thing that I thought was really interesting, which is he said that him and his wife, they never baby talk their kids. And so he
Mm-hmm.
finds that his kids, even at age like 4, are speaking like 3 or 4 syllable words with no issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he says like, kids are way smarter than we think. And you can always find a way to work with them that doesn't involve patronizing them. Although he
Yeah.
did share this funny story about his son who, what was it? I think his son like was not reading. He didn't want to read. And
Mm-hmm.
so he showed him Gundam, the anime, and he
Yeah.
told him like, this is Gundam. It's an anime about robots, but it's not in our language. So if you want to watch it, you'll have to learn to read. So son was like, okay, I'll do it for Gundam. And he did, right? So I was like, wow,
That's
that's
smart.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Find ways to engage somebody, right? That play off of their interests that are positive for them. Don't try to force somebody to do something they don't want to do. Again, like having a passion for something, or at least just an interest in it, some ancillary connection to a hobby or whatever it is. Like finding some way to make somebody feel positive about doing that thing. It's really the secret to education, at least, in my domain that I work in. It's just like, yeah, there are a million ways. If I want to get a kid into chess, but they're getting more into Minecraft than chess, I'll go buy them a Minecraft chess set. Or I'll find them, directions on how to create a chessboard and chess pieces in Minecraft that they can use as a template. And then they can show me the cool shit that they made in the game. Like those kinds of things engage and kind of build a bridge between two things that maybe they like, but one thing the interest is waning, and one thing the interest is really waxing. And I think that that's special and important for kids, and it also builds this holistic picture of the world that like no thing in life is isolated. They're all interconnected in certain ways. Nobody's documented every relationship between every game or every hobby or interest in the entire world, right? So we kind of find those on our own. It's a personal experience. Everybody's got their own unique list of things that they just like to do. And so building connections between those, or just building broad, generic connections. Like, okay, you like to play games, let's build the problem solving connection to math or whatever else it is. Um, but being able to do that over time, really, to me, is kind of a special thing to do with kids, and it works with adults too. It's harder to change your ways once you're an adult.
Yeah, it definitely is easier to change as a kid. So my final question for you is there anyone you think I should interview, and what question or questions would you like them to be asked?
Oh man. Um, I got some like chess colleagues that maybe would be interesting folks to talk to. Most of the folks that are colleagues, we think fairly similarly, so they may have a lot of the same things to say, or maybe some different things as well to add. So I could suggest those. There are maybe some folks in the Hearthstone community. One of the things that I've found with especially the classic community, because the player base isn't big enough to have like a professional scene, wasn't, because it doesn't exist anymore, um, was that everybody kind of came in with their own different career. And I met some really special people through that. So I could probably give you a list of a couple of folks that have either really interesting careers or really interesting lifestyles, positive, really profoundly positive impacts on the world at large, that could share their unique perspectives. People from whom I've learned a lot of things about how to become a better person, or at least just a new viewpoint, or somebody maybe that takes their morality and lives it out, as opposed to somebody that like says like, oh, I don't know, global warming is kind of a big problem, but like, what am I going to do about it? And then there's some people that are like, well, I know what I'm going to do about it. I'm like not going to buy a bunch of cardboard shit and plastic shit, and I'm going to do good things in the world. So people like that definitely impact me a lot. Somebody that can really go out there and do it. So I got maybe a list, a couple of folks that I could send over to you, and I think you might have fun chatting with them.
Yeah, I'd love that. And any questions you'd want me to ask them that you haven't already asked?
Oh, I just always love to hear about people's lives. I love stories. I'm a big reader myself. I read a lot of fiction from different parts of the world. And so I always like to hear a good story from folks. So maybe being able to ferret out some of the things that inspired them, some of the things that made a big impact on their life. Um, and I like wholesome stuff too. Like, something that has like the fairy tale ending, some Hallmark movie shit. I always like to hear about stuff like that, or horribly traumatic things that happened to somebody that they were able to turn around into something positive as opposed to something negative. So yeah, I'll send you over a list of maybe folks and questions. I think that'd be kind of fun to put them in the hot seat and see how they respond.
Yeah, I would enjoy that. Okay, I have two stories to share with you actually, based on what you just told me.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is a friend of mine who I've actually been playing Baldur's Gate 3 with. He's a big D&D fan.
Hmm.
Um, he's interesting because he saw global warming as a big problem, and he actually went back to school to relearn some skills, and he started AutoCAD designing and researching like biomechanics and stuff like that. And he's now come up with this plan to build these floating islands, basically, because he
Hmm.
says like most of the world is water. So like
Hmm.
uh, if we build our new land space on water, then we don't have to use up existing land space, and real estate would be cheaper. And he basically came up with this idea of these domes that are floating kelp, and so
Hmm.
they actually expand over time, and they actually get stronger with time, and they're resistant to earthquakes and storms and all of that. So I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is amazing. And they're self-sustaining. You can do, farming, and you actually end up being carbon negative because all the kelp is, apparently kelp eats carbon 20x the rate of trees per like acre,
Ah,
which is
that's
amazing.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of potential there. So I was like, okay,
That's
wow.
that's really awesome.
Yeah.
That's really awesome. Hopefully, it's a good playthrough at Baldur's Gate. Then, if somebody's got a heart like that,
Yeah, it'll
not
be
the
fun.
evil playthrough. Cool. Yeah,
Um,
that's really inspiring.
and the second story I want to share with you, because you said you liked wholesome stuff. I got to interview this couple, husband and wife couple. The
Hmm.
husband was my colleague when I worked for the government,
Hmm.
and this was a really interesting interview because they had been dating just a few months, and then they told this story of how she basically met him at Waves Coffee, and
Hmm.
she brought a laptop, and she showed him a spreadsheet of all of her bank accounts and all of her finances, and he was like, oh, I haven't prepared anything, and then he brought his the next time, and so they basically ended up engaged and married, within a few months of meeting each other, which I thought was really amazing. And they've now been together like 5 years. And
Wow,
the stories they shared and the lessons they learned, like it was really interesting to me. Um,
that's amazing. I love stories of companionship like that. Excuse me. It's hard to find a person in the world that we can really truly connect with, and especially as the pandemic has affected us. I think a lot of folks felt like their romantic lives were on hold for a while. But yeah, to find somebody with whom you not only connect, but you grow together as opposed to growing apart.
right.
Finding that is such a special thing. So I'm really happy for them that they were able to do that. People with extremely precise organizational skills and meticulous attention to detail. Those people tend to do pretty well together, for sure. But yeah, I appreciate you sharing those with me. Definitely makes my day to hear good stuff
Yeah,
like
and you
that.
also mentioned tragedy. They actually had an incident where the wife got in a car accident and she was hospitalized and then in bed rest for a few months. But the interesting thing is, the way they told me the story, I pointed out to them that that might have actually been the best thing that could have happened for their relationship. Because as it turns out, the husband stayed at home and took care of her, and he had to raise his standards of housekeeping
Hmm.
because she couldn't take care of the house and she had higher standards than his. So he then
Hmm.
had to like upkeep the house to her standards. And so he grew as a person. And then she grew really appreciative of him. And so their relationship basically accelerated bounds because of that. And I thought like, wow, that's an example of, disaster turning into a really good thing.
Yeah, it really is. And one word I haven't really said much about through our whole interview here has been respect and having respect for people. And in a competitive context, super important to have respect for your opponent because they're good too. If you're playing an elo based game, your opponent's like rated the same, so you guys are both the same skill level. Like they're going to be trying hard to win the game. We have to respect the things that they're doing, or we're going to lose to them. But in a relationship, also, it's amazing the things that we can do for a partner when we just fundamentally respect who they are and respect their decisions. We may not agree with everything, but if we respect that, then we're willing to do things that are so far outside of our comfort zone because we know that a person we respected does that thing. And we don't know why it works or how it works for them, or may make us feel uncomfortable at first to kind of push those boundaries. But ultimately, being able to just say, I use the heuristic that, okay, I trust you. And that's kind of what respect is, right? It's like, I trust you. And so I'm going to do this a little bit differently, or I'm going to do this new thing, and we'll see how it works, right? That's a bigger step than most people will ever take toward trying to do something else that's really outside of their comfort zone. So um, I feel bad for anybody that gets into a car wreck, but certainly to be able to have it be a positive for a relationship, that's an important turnaround. So that's great to hear.
Yeah, respect. There's a really good point you made there because I remember when I was playing MOBAs and I've learned like Heroes of the Storm, League of Legends, Dota 2, it's been a journey. But I feel like MOBAs really taught me to manage my emotions and like think about things better. And there was this idea I came up with that I remember just changed my perspective, which was just like if I'm playing with someone in my game, they're around the same rating as me, which means they
Hmm.
must be the same average skill as me.
Hmm.
So if I'm noticing a bunch of mistakes they're making, I'm probably better at that area of the game than they are, which means they must be better at the game at things that I can't see. So they're seeing a bunch of mistakes I'm making that I
Yeah,
can't spot.
absolutely, absolutely. Very, very insightful thing to say. And a simple logical thread that leads you to a lot of revelations about yourself as a player. And it's so, so important to respect your opponent in anything you do. And that's a really great example of the practical value of doing it. We don't have to all be super wholesome in order for a basic thing like respect to show dividends. And that's a practical one, right? Is you get a little glimpse in the mirror there to look at yourself and say, wow, this person is just like suiciding a bunch of times. Like, do I do that? And you look at like your KDA for like previous games. It's like, well, maybe I do sometimes. It's definitely one of my problems. Like I play the tank and I see red and I go, and that's not always the right thing to do. In a MOBA, uh, I respect my teammates and hope they'll follow up, but like sometimes I go in a little early. And so, yeah, being able to recognize that whatever their unique skill set is, that helps them. There are things you can learn there, but also things that you can learn about yourself is like, why am I the same rating as them? That's a really great thing. That's a big takeaway for me. I guess I hadn't really quite thought of it that way before, and that's a really great perspective that you have.
All right. Well, thanks, Peter. It's been great having you on.
Yeah, Vamsi, I really appreciate you reaching out, and it was my pleasure. Had a great time.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll see you around.
All right, you too. Take care.
Take care.